Today we are jumping into, well, maybe the oldest and most tangled human question there is. Why do we do the things we do?
Right. And specifically, how can we hold these like totally opposite impulses inside us at the same time? Our best intentions and our absolute worst instincts.
Yeah, exactly. You might be passionately arguing against the death penalty 1 minute,
Hmm.
and the next you read some horrible news story and you feel this gut reaction like that person deserves the absolute worst.
Or maybe you love watching really violent movies,
Mhm.
right? But you're also totally for strict gun control. It's this constant paradox.
And these contradictions, they really show that understanding why we act the way we do, especially complex social stuff, well, sources say it's hellishly complicated.
Yeah, you can say that again. You just can't shove people into neat little boxes labeled good or evil. It doesn't work.
So that's our mission for this deep dive, isn't it? To ditch those simple labels.
Exactly. We're going to trace this huge chain of influences backward in time, starting with the seconds right before an action. Then looking at brain chemistry, how we develop, even cultural evolution over thousands of years. It's all about how context shapes us.
Right, let's unpack that. Starting right at the moment of action. The proximal triggers. What's going on in our brains like seconds or minutes before a big decision?
Okay, so this gets us into neurobiology. Let's simplify it. Think of your brain in, say, 3 layers. Layer 1, super old, the reptile brain. It handles automatic stuff, shivering, hunger, kicking off a stress response.
Got it. Ancient autopilot.
Pretty much. Then layer 2 is more the mammal brain. This is where emotions hang out. Fear, craving, feeling attached to others. It's asking, how does this feel?
And layer 3 is the neocortex, the big boss.
Hmm.
Language, thinking ahead, abstract thought.
Right, but here's the key. They don't work in isolation. Your neocortex, layer 3, reads a scary book that triggers layer 2 to feel fear, which then tells layer 1, hey, start a stress response. Maybe you get goosebumps.
So the thinking part can trigger the feeling part, which triggers the automatic part. They're all interconnected.
Totally. And when we talk about those immediate decisions, that emotional layer 2 is key, especially a little area called the amygdala.
Ah, yes, the amygdala. Fear, aggression, that sort of thing.
It's definitely central to processing fear and making emotional calls. We see this really clearly in something called the ultimatum game.
Okay, remind me how that works.
2 players have to split some money. Player A suggests a split. Say, they offer player B just $9 out of $100.
That's not very fair.
Exactly. And player B often rejects it, meaning nobody gets anything. It's irrational from a purely financial view, but it's driven by this desire to punish the unfairness.
And that urge to punish, that's the amygdala lighting up.
Bingo. And here's the kicker. People with amygdala damage, they act atypically generous in the game.
How sad.
They lose that emotional, that's not fair surge. So they just take the $9. They treat the unfair human player like a computer just giving the money. The emotional sting is gone.
Wow. Okay, so the amygdala drives those gut reactions, but something keeps us in check, usually.
Usually. That's the job of the prefrontal cortex, the PFC,
No.
right behind your forehead. It's the brain's executive control center. Basically, it helps you do the harder thing when your gut, or your amygdala, is screaming to do something else.
Like impulse control, planning.
Exactly. And the classic example here is Phineas Gage. Horrific accident. An iron rod went right through his PFC.
I remember reading about him. He survived, but he wasn't him anymore.
That's the famous quote, Gage was no longer Gage. His cognitive abilities were mostly intact, but his personality totally changed. The respected foreman became impulsive, socially inappropriate, couldn't plan. The executive control was just gone.
A stark illustration. But you're saying even the PFC's control depends on the situation.
Absolutely. Think about the trolley problem. Familiar with that one?
Vaguely. Divert a train to save 5 people, but kill one.
Right. Scenario 1. You pull a lever. It's detached, utilitarian. Brain scans show the rational part of the BSC is active. Most people say they'd pull the lever. Scenario 2. Same outcome. Save 5, kill 1.
Right.
But this time, you have to physically push a large person onto the track to stop the train.
Oh, right. That feels completely different, much harder.
And most people say they wouldn't do it. Why? Because that small change, the physical act, engages the emotional circuits. The amygdala, parts of the PSC linked to emotion. Different brain areas light up, leading to a totally different moral choice.
So a tiny shift in context flips the switch in our brains.
Precisely. Which leads to a really humbling point. We're way less rational and in control than we like to think.
Yeah.
We're constantly swayed by stuff we don't even notice. Subliminal cues.
Like the broken window effect. Is that related? I thought that was about neighborhoods.
It is, but there's a deeper psychological layer. Studies actually tested this subtly. If people just saw minor signs of broken norms, bikes chained illegally, some graffiti,
Mm-hmm.
they became unconsciously more likely to break other, totally unrelated norms, like littering, or even stealing money left temptingly in a mailbox.
Wait, seriously. Just seeing a bike chained to the wrong fence makes me more likely to, like, pocket €5 I find. That sounds crazy.
This sounds crazy, but the effect seems real. It's like the visual cue of a break-in rule whispers, rules don't really matter that much around here.
Yeah.
It's a subtle, unconscious nudge towards disinhibition.
Huh. That really undermines the idea of purely rational choice in the moment. Okay, let's zoom out a bit. What about influences acting over hours or days? Hormones, for instance.
Good transition. Let's
Okay.
tackle the big one, testosterone. T. The stereotype is just.
Yeah.
T equals aggression.
Yeah, more tea, more fighting.
And that's way too simple. The key nuance is status. Testosterone seems to make individuals more willing to do what it takes to gain or maintain status.
Okay, so it's about competitiveness for status.
Exactly. And how you compete for status depends entirely on the social context.
Yeah.
If, say, in a lab, you made being kind and generous the absolute coolest way to gain status, then boosting someone's testosterone would likely make them compete like mad to be the kindest person in the room.
Yeah.
The issue isn't the hormone itself. It's how often our societies reward aggression as a path to status.
That reframes it completely. What about oxytocin, often called the love drug or cuddle hormone?
Right? It gets great press for promoting bonding, trust, empathy.
But I sense a but coming.
There's always a but in biology. Oxytocin definitely increases pro-sociality, but mainly towards your in-group, your us.
Ah, so it helps bond the team.
Yes, but studies show it can simultaneously make people spontaneously worse towards perceived thems, especially if they seem like a threat. It sharpens the US versus them distinction, makes you better at identifying who's on your team, sometimes at the expense of outsiders.
So it's not universal love, it's more like team bonding hormone with a potential downside for between group relations.
You could put it that way.
Yeah.
And finally, in this time frame, we have to consider stress. Not just momentary stress, but sustained chronic stress.
Right. We know that's bad for us generally.
And it specifically messes with the brain circuits we've been talking about. Chronic stress makes it easier to learn fear associations,
Okay.
but it simultaneously weakens the PFC's ability to unlearn or extinguish that fear. So the accelerator for fear gets floored, just that the brakes get weaker?
Not a good combination.
Definitely not. And there are often gender differences in stress responses, too. The classic male response is often fight or flight.
Adrenaline, cortisol.
Yep. Whereas females often show more of a tend and befriend response, protecting offspring, seeking social support. And this seems linked to oxytocin release during stress for women.
Interesting. Different hormonal cocktails driving different typical strategies. Okay, let's pull back even further. The really deep past, development, culture, evolution. How does growing up shape these behaviors?
A huge factor is adolescence. That period of, maximum risk-taking, novelty-seeking, caring intensely about peers.
Definitely remembered that phase. Hormones raging. Right.
Hormones play a role, for sure. But a deeper reason is that the PFC, our trusty brake pedal, is the last part of the brain to fully mature. It's still under construction throughout adolescence and even into the early 20s.
So you've got the accelerator floored by hormones and emotions, but the brakes aren't fully installed yet.
That's a great way to put it. It's a biological mismatch, which helps explain why risky behavior peaks then. And consider this statistic. Probably the single greatest crime-fighting tool we have.
More police, harsher sentences.
Nope. Simply turning 30.
Get out, really?
Statistically, yeah. Rates of violence, both impulsive and premeditated, plummet around that age. It strongly suggests that final maturation of the frontal cortex plays a massive role in reining things in.
Wow, that's sobering. Okay, what about even deeper influences? Genes, the whole nature versus nurture thing.
Right, and we really need to move past the idea that genes determine behavior on their own. It's always an interaction.
Nature and nurture, not versus stuff.
Exactly. One source had a great analogy. Asking if a behavior is caused more by genes or environment is like asking if the area of a rectangle is determined more by its length or its width.
It's meaningless. You need both.
You need both. And the environment can have huge effects on what a gene actually does. There was this incredible mouse study.
Tell me.
Okay, researchers used genetically identical mice strains, same genes. They gave them cocaine in different labs. In one lab, the mice got a bit more active, moved maybe 600, 700 centimeters more.
Okay, a noticeable effect.
In another lab, with the exact same strain of mice, Their activity exploded. They moved over 5,000 centimeters more.
Whoa! What was different?
That's the point. They don't even know for sure. Subtle, unidentified differences in the environment, handling, cage bedding, noise levels, something drastically changed how that gene responded to the drug. The gene only provides the potential. Context pulls the trigger.
Genes are potential, context is realization.
There.
Got it. And
Yeah.
culture. How does that fit into the biological picture?
Humans are unique with our symbolic thought, our metaphors. We can think abstractly about things like justice or purity or disgust related to ideas, not just rotten food. Moral disgust.
Right. We feel disgusted by actions, not just tastes.
And the brain, being efficient, often didn't evolve brand new circuits for these abstract ideas. It kind of duct taped them onto existing systems.
Duct tape.
Metaphorically. So for moral disgust, the feeling you get about an unfair act, it heavily involves the insula, the exact same brain region that processes visceral disgust, like wanting to gag from a bad smell.
Huh. So the brain recycles circuits for new abstract jobs.
It tinkers. But this metaphorical link can be exploited. There's a dark tactic called pseudo-speciation, making a group seem like a different, lesser species.
Dehumanization.
Exactly. And the most chilling example is probably the Rwandan genocide. The propaganda relentlessly, obsessively referred to the Tutsi people only as Inyenzi cockroaches.
God, that's awful.
It was strategically awful. It wasn't just name-calling. It was designed to hijack that ancient disgust circuit in the insula. By framing them not as humans, but as disgusting pests.
It made the unthinkable violence possible.
It helped bypass the normal human inhibition against killing other humans. If you genuinely believe you're exterminating vermin, the act feels different in your brain. It's a terrifying example of how cultural framing context can weaponize our biology.
Okay, let's try to pull all these threads together. What does this multi-layered view mean for things like morality, free will, responsibility?
Well, first, the roots of morality seem deeper than just human culture. Even non-human primates show basic fairness principles.
Like the monkeys rejecting unequal pay, the cucumber versus grape experiment.
Exactly. That capuchin getting furious because it got a cucumber for a pebble, while its buddy got a much better grape for the same task. That screams innate sense of fairness, or at least unfairness aversion.
So moral intuition might be quite ancient and emotional.
It seems that way, often driven by those emotional brain regions, like the amygdala and parts of the PFC. The gut feeling often comes before the conscious reasoning. We see this with patients who have damage to the emotional parts of the PFC.
What happens with them?
They become hyper-utilitarian in moral dilemmas. They'd logically conclude it's fine to, say, sacrifice a family member to save 5 strangers.
Oof. Which most people would find emotionally abhorrent, even if the numbers work out.
Right. Their lack of emotional input leads to choices that feel morally wrong to most of us. It shows how much emotion shapes our moral landscape.
And the legal system sort of implicitly acknowledges this biological influence, doesn't it?
It does, even without using the neuroscience terms. Think about the Supreme Court ruling against the death penalty for adolescents.
Because their brains aren't fully developed. The PFC again.
Precisely. The reasoning is that their immature frontal cortex limits their culpability, their capacity for judgment and impulse control. It's an admission that biology sets boundaries on free will and responsibility.
But we can't just excuse all bad behavior because my brain made me do it, can we? Where's the line?
That's the massive challenge. And it comes down to the prediction problem. Neuroscience is still pretty bad at predicting specific behaviors based on brain factors alone.
How so?
Well, if you have a broken leg, we can predict with near 100% certainty you won't be running a marathon next week. If you have the gene for Huntington's, we can predict the disease progression pretty accurately.
Right. Clear biological cause and effect.
But if someone has, say, significant frontal cortex damage or suffered severe childhood trauma, factors we know increase risk for violence or bad decisions, can we predict if they will actually commit a crime? Our prediction rates are often less than 50%, sometimes much less.
So we know there's a link, but it's not deterministic. There's still huge variability.
Exactly. There's this huge gap between identifying risk factors and predicting individual outcomes. And that gap, that uncertainty, is where the concept of free will currently lives. One AI pioneer, Marvin Minsky, apparently defined free will as those internal forces I do not understand.
Ah, that's pretty good. So because we don't understand all the complex internal and external forces acting on someone,
We still operate with concepts like choice and responsibility. We can't yet reduce everything to pure mechanism because our understanding is so incomplete.
So, wrapping this all up, what's the big takeaway from this deep dive?
I think the core message is that we aren't hardwired to be just good or bad. We've evolved to be incredibly sensitive to context. Genes, hormones, brain structure, they create potentials, vulnerabilities, tendencies.
But the environment, the situation, our history, our culture, that's what shapes which potentials actually get
You
expressed.
beautifully put. It's all about the interaction, and that
Mhm.
complexity, that sensitivity to context actually offers a lot of hope
Hope. How so after talking about all the ways we can be influenced unconsciously?
because it implies change is possible. Look at this amazing example of the baboon troop.
Baboons? Okay.
Yeah, in this one troop, the most aggressive, high-status males happened to eat tainted meat from a garbage dump and died from TB.
Oh, wow. Okay, so the bullies were gone.
Pretty much. And what happened next was remarkable. The remaining males and females established a completely different social atmosphere. Much lower aggression, much more mutual grooming, more affiliation, a peaceful culture.
Okay, interesting.
But here's the amazing part. New adolescent males would eventually migrate into this troop from other, more typically aggressive troops. And instead of taking over violently,
They chilled out.
they adopted the local peaceful culture. The social context was powerful enough to reshape the behavior of these newcomers. It showed this incredible social plasticity.
That is incredible. Baboons learning peace from each other.
Right. So if baboons can show that much flexibility, anyone who says human violence or our other worst behaviors are just biologically inevitable. Well, as the source material puts it, they know too little about primates, including us.
That leaves us with a powerful final thought, doesn't it?
I think so. Think about the history of science. Things we once blamed on moral failing or even demonic possession like epilepsy.
Right. Now we know it's a neurological condition.
Exactly. We see it as a biological problem, not a failure of character. So the question for you, the listener, is this. If we're only just beginning to scratch the surface of understanding the deep biological and contextual roots of our worst behaviors,
Like crime, addiction, cruelty.
shouldn't we maybe start applying that same logic, the idea that it's not the person, it's the condition, or at least it's incredibly complex? Shouldn't that push our justice system, and maybe just how we view each other, towards more humility, more focus on understanding and change, rather than just irreversible punishment?
Something profound to think about.